the bounds of the world. Programming brings out those concepts into actual structure. It's the code, the physics, the logic behind your game that makes it function on a computer. And asset production creates the models, the art, and the feel of the game that give life to your programming and your game design and your idea itself. Those are the general roles that you'll have. Of course, later on when you move on, you can break this down into even more roles. Back-end dev, or database developer, those kind of things. There's so much that goes into these roles, but this is just a general overview. Lastly, for this segment, how do we piece these components and these roles together in a cycle that actually makes things work? Of course, everything has to start with ideation. This is the raw idea that pops out in your head, just the very most basic spark that leads you to wanting to create your game. For example, have any of you wanted to create a game before? And the first thought that popped in your head wasn't a concrete idea, it was just a thought. That was the ideation, the spark that you move on with and start conceptualizing. Stage 2, conceptualization. This is where your spark and your basic idea turns into something more structured, something more concrete, something that you can actually work on and work with to create a game. With that conceptualization, the structures, the concepts that are on a more abstracted level, you can start your prototyping. Now, of course, what happens now, stage 3, 4, and 5, I'm going to be completely transparent with you guys. It's not going to be as linear as this. When you start going into the real world, when you start creating your own games, this is a good general concept for you guys to go through. So prototyping, this is where you start turning your ideas and your concepts into an actual playable game. And then you play test. Your first prototypes are going to be bare bones. They're just going to cover the very bare minimum to make your game an actual game. But here's where you see if your idea is worth working on. Here is where you see if your game is fun enough to be made into a fully fledged game. And if it is, you move on to iteration. You go again and again. You play test, you add to your game, ideate new ideas, and you go back to creating new prototypes, testing, and iterating. That's the cycle. But as I said before, and I'll continue to repeat over and over, it's not this simple. This is just a rough abstraction and the conceptualization that will give you a little bit more of an understanding when you want to move on in game dev. Alright, that covers my part. We'll be moving on to the more specialized subsegments and talking more about each segment of game dev in more depth.
Alright, thank you Andrew for your time. Basically the blueprinting stage, or like we're gonna teach you guys how to get started with your own game design document. Okay, so first we need to understand what is game design. So it's basically like the blueprint that dictates how a game is supposed to go. And it has like 3 core elements, and these are like game rules, core mechanics, and the player experience. So let's dive deeper into them. So let's talk about game rules. Okay, so game rules are basically the rules of the universe in your game. And alright, so we have like different types of game rules. So I got like a little example to explain like how they are. And okay, so first we will talk about the operational rules. So basically it's like the basic controls. If you have to like handle your basic controls properly. So for Subway Surfer, it's very straightforward. You just have to like swipe up to jump. So like your game rules, like basically the operational rules are supposed to be fundamental rules, so we have to make sure that it's easy for players to like understand, or else the players will feel like really frustrated. And for the second one is the constitutive rules. So this is like the hidden code, or like the behind the scenes of like the game. So you have to make sure that for example, like 7-band algorithm in Tetris is supposed to be there. If the code is wrong in the background, then your game is not like gonna work properly, and there will be like break code, you know, the rule behind. And for the third one is the implicit rules. So it's basically something like you wouldn't expect. So for example, like in Mario Kart, it's like if you press the jump button, like you know that you're supposed to jump, right? But there's like a hidden block. So this is basically like something that you wouldn't expect. So like this is like implicit rules. So you have to think about the implicit rules in your game so that the players don't feel frustrated, like, oh, we didn't know about this, and stuff like that. And the fourth one is the instructional rules. So it's like I would say the most important part of the rules that you set. because like it's like teaches players how to basically play the game. So if they don't know how to play the games, for example, in Gender Simulator, learning biology gives you like new abilities to kill. So if you don't know that, the game will like teach you like with a description. But if you don't have that, then you'll be like, oh, like how are we supposed to gain new abilities? And you'll be stuck in like level 1. So those are the type of rules. Okay. So let's talk about the core mechanics next. Alright, so the core mechanics are like the words of the gameplay. So we have like micro and macro mechanics. So we're gonna be using Minecraft as an example in here. Alright, so for micro mechanics, so it's something that happens from second to second, like minute to minute. So like basically what you're doing in the game from like moment to moment. So we have like primary mechanics first of all. So it's something like in Minecraft, like you put the block or like you cut the tree. So this is like the primary mechanics. So like I said before, like you have to make sure that it's easy to understand so that the players don't have to handle like chunky controls and like get frustrated. And the second one is the secondary mechanics. So this is something that supports the primary mechanics. So like, for example, like you just break the blocks, right? But like if you do like a pickaxe, if you craft a pickaxe, like it's faster for you to break the blocks. So it actively supports the primary mechanics. So you have to make sure that everything that you put, like the features that you put, support the primary mechanics so that it doesn't cause feature creep. Okay. And then there we go, the macro mechanics. So this is like the long-term business plan, basically, what you're gonna do in the game and how you're gonna progress. All right. Okay, so first of all, economic mechanics. I know it's like really complicated here, but basically it just means like the mathematical like systems or like how you collect or manage or exchange your resources. So like these are like basically like in Minecraft you have to like exchange stuff or like to get an emerald and stuff like that. So if you do this wrong, then like you will either have like no reward for the lot of resource that you put in, or you will just have too many rewards for like little reward. So yeah, so you will be swimming in like rewards that you no longer care about. So yeah, so that's the economic mechanics. And for progression mechanics, it's like how you progress throughout the game. So like in Minecraft, my example that I'm gonna use is like you have to get like netherite, like swords, and like you have to suit up and like you collect the resources to be the Ender Dragon, right? So basically, like you have to like always level up in like a game. So you have to make sure that the progression mechanics are like connected to each other, so that like you wouldn't go from like you wouldn't be like, oh my god, did they even test this game? Like, is it even playable? You know. And all right, okay. And the third part is the player experience. So the player experience, I'm gonna be using Resident Evil as an example here. Okay. All right, let's break down the NBA. Mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Okay, so for mechanics, it's basically like I said before, it's the first of the game and it's like the fundamental what makes or breaks the game. So like in a horror game like this, we have like severely limited like inventory slots or like slowed weapon reload speed so that it makes you feel like, oh my god, my weapon is gonna die, I'm gonna die. Okay, so like it will give you like a sense of fear if you master the mechanics itself. Okay. And the second one is the dynamics. Oh, we got Liam Energy over here. Awesome. Okay, so this is what happens when a human player interacts with the game. So this is what happened in like the runtime, basically. So if you don't like, you have to play tests to make sure that all the mechanics are working properly during the runtime. Because like if you don't, then the players will find the loopholes and like it will kind of like break the game. So you have to make sure about that. And all right. So for aesthetics, we got major pictures. Yay. Okay, so yeah, but she is part of the aesthetic, but the aesthetic really is like basically how a player feels while playing your game. So like how do they feel? So the psychological like the feeling that they get from playing your game. So for horror games, obviously we have like visuals like low lights and like we have monsters that are really scary and stuff like that. Because if you don't like master the aesthetics of the game will feel completely soulless and the horror game will not be scary. Yep. Okay, So the 3 pillars of fun. So what are they? Do you guys have any idea? No? Okay. So these are the challenge, reward, and progression. So they're like kind of codependent with each other without like, they cannot function without one another, very romantic. So first of all, like let's say you don't have a challenge in your game. Like you will just have reward and progression. Why are you even playing the game? Like what are we even doing in here? Like why are we getting the rewards and why are we progressing? Doesn't make sense, right? And if you don't have the reward, you have the challenge and progression. So you're doing the challenges, it's so difficult, but what are you getting and why are you progressing? It doesn't make sense at all. And let's say you don't have the progression, you have the challenge and reward. So like your game will just end after one level. Like you just complete one challenge and then you just get a reward and it's done. Oh, are we supposed to play this game? I don't know. So yeah, you have to make sure that all these are like in your games and they like kind of interlink to each other in a way that's like more balanced, and I'll explain more about that in the next slides. Alright, so let's talk about the 6-step blueprint and iteration. Okay, so what are the 6 steps? So the 6 steps, first of all, core action. So this is basically like what you do in your game, like from start to finish, what are you doing? So what you do repeatedly for Minecraft, like you're just collecting resources, fighting zombies and stuff. And why are you doing this? So you have to have like an objective in your game. So like, why are you getting the resources? Why are you fighting? So this, just the core actions is just like here with the objective because obviously you have to know why you're doing the things that you're doing, right? And you have to progress long term. And there comes the loop structure. So this is something that connects everything into a cycle. So like, let's say like after you hunt the monsters or something, like what do you do next? Like you already got the rewards, what do you do next? So that's where the loop structure comes in, and then you will just keep maybe fight bigger monsters or like build your base and like stuff like that. And another thing that is really important is like the feedback. So by feedback we mean like not rewards yet, but it's like visual and audio and like basically the engagement that gives you like a little bit of dopamine. So like dopamine boost. So we will talk more about like how to make good visuals and audio in the next sections. And let's go towards the challenge and reward. So, okay, so challenge and reward. So this is the part where like, it's like you have to make sure that they are balanced. So like, if you have like too many challenges and you only have like a small reward, they will just be like, okay, like we did all that for nothing. Okay. And if you have too many rewards and if you have little challenge, they'll just be like, oh my god, I got so many things for just like a little challenge. And it will feel really boring. So you have to like always make sure that you're balancing these to maintain the player engagement. And lastly, we have the time frame layer. So you have to like kind of know like your goals of like, what are you doing like over the seconds, and then after minutes, and then afterwards like after hours. So for example, like in Minecraft, like what are you doing in seconds? You're building blocks, you're doing stuff. For minutes, what are you doing? You're building houses, building zombies. For hours, what are you doing? You're collecting resources to defeat an Ender Dragon. Okay. Alright, so iteration what? So iteration is basically like it will goes on even after you release your game. So it's basically like play testing. Like the players will play test your game and then they will give you feedback. And you will analyze all those feedback and then you will like try to improve and you will do it again and again even after you have like released your game. So that is the thing. So let's make your own game design document. Hey. Okay, so today's example is Chef RPG. Do you guys know Chef RPG? Oh, okay. So good to know. So like we have 3 buckets in this session, and the first bucket that we're gonna explore is the concept. So it's like something that a lot of us just like spend a lot of time like being stuck in. Like I think most of the artists, how many artists are in this room right now? Oh, 1, 2, I think he's there too. Okay, 3 artists are in this room right now. So a lot of us like we're just stuck in like the first prototyping stage. Basically, we are like trying to blend it like to become the next Stardew Valley or something, and then maybe just get stuck in the concept stage. So yeah, let's explore the concept stage. So first, you will pick a genre. So for example, Chef RPG, a little background information, is like, it's a restaurant management game, but it's also an open world, and it's like a life simulator. So you will be doing the same thing that you're doing in Stardew Valley, but you're also gonna like manage a business or even like bad houses and stuff like that. So you have to first pick a genre. So for example, this one can go under like cozy game, life simulation, RPG, and stuff like that. So you can like ask yourself these questions. You can just like take a photo and like we can share at the end of the session as well. Okay. So the quick tip is to like pick your genre early and use it as a guide for your design decisions. So your design is not like, okay, at first it looks like a cozy game, but slowly it became a horror game or something like that. So to not let that happen, we have to pick the genre and use it as a guide. Okay. So let's decide the general setting. So basically it's like you have to decide what time period and what world like and what lore does your characters have. So this is basically something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and we're low-key stuck in this stage. But if you can move past it, like, and if you have like the whole concept properly, then you should be able to move past it. So the quick tip is to have your settings like consistent across art, story, characters, and gameplay. Okay, and the next thing is to keep references. So for Chef RPG is strongly inspired by Stardew Valley and like this game, I forgot the name of. Oh, it's Last Night something something. Okay, so alright. So the references are like not meant to be copied. So you have to use them like just to communicate ideas with your team if you're like designing. Because like sometimes like just showing some references is better than explaining it to them for the next 1 hour, like how it's supposed to look like. Yeah. Okay, so the bucket 2. Okay, we have done the bucket 1 stage. So the bucket 2 is the gameplay. Alright. So first we have to define like the core pillars. So for example, for Sharp RPG, the core pillars were like something like this. Is like uploaded by the creator. So it's going for cooking, cyberpunk, fantasy world, like a lot. But he later like narrows down to like 3 to 4 pillars, because like having too many pillars is something that a lot of us mistake. Like we tend to like overthink about our game and we want to like combine everything together. So it's better to just limit yourself to 3 to 4 pillars so that you can have like a clear vision of how your game is supposed to be. Okay, and next we have to define the game loop and mechanics. Alright, so for this one, the quick tip is to just make sure like the players do like know what to do next, and every action that the players do should naturally lead to the next action. And the players shouldn't feel like unrewarded or like unsure about what to do next. So that's how you master the game loop. Okay. Alright, and the last thing for this bucket is to define the win and lose conditions. So you have to make sure that the players know what they're trying to avoid and what they're trying to go towards all the time. Alright, so this is like the bucket 3 is like somewhere where a lot of us game developers has like a really hard time doing, because like we already have a lot of things in the market already, and like we thought that the game development is like the most difficult thing, but the most difficult thing is the marketing, guys. Okay, so let's go to the business then. How many of you guys are business majors in here? Oh, we have 2. Awesome. You should contact them if you guys want like business plans or something. Okay, so first we have to define the target audience. I think it's pretty basic, like it's in every business lecture. We have to define the target audience. So we ask ourselves like, who's most likely to enjoy the game? So we can narrow it down to age and lifestyle, gaming preferences, and play habits. So like for Chef RPG, for example, is like targeted towards the cozy gamers and like people who enjoy the business simulation like type of games, and like young adults. So like that there's the age, and then they want most likely to play the game but right before bed because it's like a cozy game. So you have to know your target audience like psychologically. Okay. And the next thing is to search, market, and competitors. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have like this thing where you think like, oh my god, my game is so unique. This is like once in a million years, like this is an invention, right? But to be honest, you already have like a lot of games that are similar to your game in the market already. So like after you design your whole game, you have to make sure to search your competitors. And you have to solve the problems that your competitors are unable to solve or they don't have. So your selling point, basically. So for example, Chef RPG is like inspired by Stardew Valley, but it expands more towards the management like type of game, like how do I say, restaurant management type of game. So it just combines these two together. And Paralyzed did it very well. So a lot of people from Sin 4 are like switching to Paralyzed, and this game is definitely done by a frustrated Sin 4 fan. Yay. Okay, so lastly we have to decide like the key success factors. So instead of going like, oh, our game should be fun, we have to be more specific, like, oh, 90% of the players play more than 20 hours, or the game runs above like 60 frames per second on a target hardware. Okay, so for blueprinting tools, we have like 4 tools that you could definitely use. Obviously, first your hand, your pen and paper. You can just like use it for rapid brainstorming and stuff. And you can also use like other applications like Miro, Milanote, and Notion. So they have like their advantages like over another. So for example, Miro is good for teamwork, and Milanote is good for like visual mood boards and stuff like that. And Notion is very good for like heavy documenting. Yep, so you can also search up like online references, like there's like free templates available for you, or like there's like also buy, the things that you have to buy. Okay, so that's all about my section. Thank you for listening to my part, and I'm gonna hand it over to Catherine.
Thank you so much for introducing us to the game design segment. And now I'd like to get you guys to move on to world building. Okay, so world building is a very essential part in making the nerdy side of your game. And it isn't always strictly only for games, it can be for any visual media, for example, movies, comics, anime, etc. And before I elaborate anything further, I'd like to say that world building is just based on your imagination. It doesn't have like a rule to make a story. However, when it comes to storytelling your world to an audience, there's some things that you need to consider. Okay, so in short, world building is a short process. It's a process of constructing a world. The point of world building is not just to build a whole world, but to basically develop enough details to make the world believable to live in. But what defines a world though? So imagine a world is a subject that is being built, and it can be in any kind of form. It can be in a singular island, it can be in a continent, a planet, a galaxy, anything that you can put in a metaphysical way if it's not physical. Okay. So now I like to dig down more into the topic by going through 5 W's, which is who, what, when, where, and why. And the purpose of this section is to get you to consider what to consider in world building. So starting with who, you would want to consider what kind of species, individuals, creatures, or hierarchy in your world. So let's set an example. Game of Thrones, for example. If you guys are not familiar, Game of Thrones is basically about rivalry between kingdoms or wars between kingdoms. So what can you think? Like what individuals are in that world? So royals, rebels, knights, peasants. Yeah. Listen to that.
The only thing I know is the Hyborian language.
Yeah, exactly. So that way you can also like determine what language they speak.
Yeah. And in another medium like Star Trek, there's a Klingon language.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, let's move on to what? So, you will want to consider the law of physics or the magic system in that world. So for example, you might wanna like pop some questions in your head, like what is the main conflict in that world? Or what does the magic does in that world? Okay, so next up to when. So in order to contextualize your story within the world's timeline, you have to consider like the era, the historical events that happened in that world. And that way you can also determine the current status of your world's timeline. So, you know what, let's take like an example from an anime. Let's say like Neo Genesis Evangelion. So if you guys are familiar with, if you guys are not familiar with that, let me fill you in. Basically, I think like 1,000 years ago, there's like a major incident, and there's also like the second one happened like very recently. So what's happened is that some aliens, which they refer to as angels, will try to destroy humanity. And currently, humanity are trying to defend, basically try to defend their humanity against the aliens. So yeah. And of course, that's where, obviously, when you want to build a world, you have to determine or sort of like to think about the location and the map, including the geography too. So it can be like forests, mountains, cities, wherever. And after you guys have determined all the settings in your world, you will want to think of the reason, like why? Why does this happen? Why does this event happen in this time? Or what's the cause of the war, basically? Okay, so, well, since we're also kind of deep into game, I also like to talk about a bit of a game mechanic. So, when you world build, you basically create a story, and when you create a story, you also build a genre. So a genre will determine the game mechanic in the game itself. So I have like 4 examples. So for example, if you're in a horror game, like you're the character, let's say you're trapped in a abandoned hospital that's haunted as hell, what's the first instinct that you guys will do? Yeah, so like basically get the hell out of here. Yes.
Because you don't know where you are.
Yeah, exactly. So you will try to like explore the place, and then you scan, and then you start to realize that you're not supposed to be here, or you just kind of like trying to survive at this point, you know. Especially if you've seen something. Yes, that. Yeah. So there goes that concept, and then once you put it in the game, you will want to make it into sort of like a survival game, like a survival mechanic, which I also put like a reference, a game called Stalker. They use this mechanic like radiation management, hunger, and weapon degradation to immerse the player in a dangerous post-apocalyptic landscape. Okay, so next, let's say if you guys want to make a world that's kind of like a slice of life or adventure, which I put Minecraft as a reference. So of course, reference to the real world, we have to like pay for everything. There's like economy everywhere. So you also have to like consider like the resource management economy. Like Minecraft, they have like a feature to trade emeralds for items, or you trade items for emeralds. Okay, so next one, which is also relating to the previous one, but this is basically more relating to the environmental interaction. So let's say if you're going to make like an adventure game, you will want to make some mechanic that allows the players to choose attributes and roles and engage with the setting itself. And of course, for the final example, will be narrative-driven puzzles. And I put the Return of Obra Dinn. Basically, let's say if you're trying to make a mystery concept of or a murder mystery type of game, so you will want to make like a puzzle mechanic, and as the gameplay goes, you're also basically unlocking more stories. And yeah, that actually concludes the world building part. But I also love to talk about art in world building. So art in general, it's kind of self-explanatory, but I also like to relate it to world building, because world building in order to showcase worldbuilding, there's like two ways: writing and art. So, of course, usually you write first and then you make the art out of it. And I will sort of like show you guys briefly of like some concept arts right now from like two games, The Legend of Zelda and Sword. So as you can see here, Legend of Zelda is pretty much like an adventure or RPG sort of like genre. And let's say if you guys already set up the setting of the world, you can start by the environmental side. Like for example, the artists here, they're clearly showcasing the composition, the value studies, the color palette of the world. And of course, they also show the functionality of the concept. For example, they have a feature of having a wolf friend. And the wolf friend will act as a navigator dog and like an ally to fight enemies with you. And for the next one is gore. So as you can see here, they're more leaning towards creature design and as well for the environmental design. And yeah, you can see here, they're trying to blend the character and the genre itself. As you can see from the character here, this character looks like a box because they're always contained in a container or a cage. And yeah, one thing about art in world building is that you want to know what makes your world stand out, like what is so iconic. Like for example, when you see this concept, you will kind of like, oh, this looks like a experimental lab or something, like a biohazard lab or something. Like that will immediately speak out to you. So art in world building also kind of acts as an identity or something to build up a brand of your world. So that's the thing. Can any of you guys tell where this picture is from? Yes, Castlevania. Like how to say this? Okay, so this picture itself is like very iconic because like the building design and
based off of an existing castle called Grand Castle in Pennsylvania, Romania.
yes, exactly. Like the moment you see this, you already sort of like assume this is like from a vampire world. Or maybe something undead, as you can see that the red moon's literally behind it. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Okay, so can anyone guess from where this is from? Yeah, this is Genshin Impact. Yeah. So yeah, art can, like I said, art can act as like a brand. Like usually people like to refer brand with the characters because character design is like the first thing that people notice. But yes, but of course the other thing that makes it memorable is the environment. So that's basically all for art and world building. So now I'm going to pass to Leah for the asset production.
Okay, thank you so much, Catherine, for your explanation in world building. But first of all, hi guys! Do you guys still have energy left?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, where's the energy? I want to hear it.
Yes.
Get inspired, guys. Okay. So, hello everyone. I'm Leah, or as known in the geek world as Hideki. My specialization is in concept art design. So. Here's the big question to continue the world building because Catherine already explained about environment, how to create a good character design. So we're gonna first move to the concept art, the definition. Well, it's pretty boring because it's technical. Concept art is a form of illustration used to convey an idea used for films, video games, and animation. And as you can see, this is usually the typical concept art that you are required to make in a AAA studio. Usually there's a full sketch body first, then there's sketch of emotions, and there's usually a layout where you have your character design full. But now, yay, let's play Guess the Shadow. So it's been a bit monotone from the start, so I want to lighten up you guys a bit. But I have few rules. When we play Guess the Character Shadow, I'm gonna count 1, 2, 3, and then you guys are gonna raise your hand, and I'm gonna pick one, and you guys gonna answer. No answering beforehand, okay? When I choose, you answer, and you will get a gift. Okay, you guys understand? Yeah. Amazing. No. So, we're gonna first guess from that character. In 1, 2, 3. Okay, Abdallah. No, sadly, it's not. Should we give Abdallah another chance or should we move on? Okay, that guy in the back. What? Who? It's not Timmy Turner. Okay, you. Yes. Yes. Cosmo. Yes, from what series?
What?
From what series?
Where are your parents?
Amazing! Grab your food here. It's Cosmo from Fairy Odd Parents. It's an old cartoon. Here you go. Okay, moving on to the second one. In 1, 2, 3. Okay, you go over there. Yes, amazing. Here you go. Can you throw it up? Okay. On your face. Oh, yes, amazing. Okay, moving to the third character. In 1, 2, 3. Okay, you there.
Finn.
From what series?
Adventure Time.
Here you go. Okay, now we're gonna move to last 2 questions, so prepare yourself, guys. Okay, that character in 1, 2, 3. Okay, Abdullah. From what series? Okay, well, here's your snake queen. Amazing. Okay, and now moving to the last character in 1, 2, 3. Okay, you. From what series? Okay, here you go. I'm gonna show it. Okay, thank you so much, guys, and that's all for the game quiz. But no, there's actually more. So, what we did just now is base the character from the silhouette, and basically, most of the time, you guys are able to guess it correctly. Why? Because the silhouette determines who the character is, and I think it's pretty obvious that this is Bayonetta. Who answered Bayonetta earlier? Abdullah. Can you explain why you can guess Bayonetta correctly? Yes, she has a distinct feature that differentiates her from other characters. And Azim, can you explain why you can guess Cloud Strife?
The spiky hair, the buster sword.
And the big sword.
Yes, it's because Cloud Strife has Buster Sword, the legendary sword from Final Fantasy VII. It's very, very noticeable. And then, basically, what can a silhouette convey about a character? So, when you're making a character concept, the first thing that professional will tell, this is what my mentor from Lightspeed Studio told me, is to always draft a character silhouette beforehand to make your character distinguishable and make your character noticeable. Because a bad silhouette basically can make your character look boring. That's why always prepare a blank draft of the silhouette to actually make your concept character. And now we're gonna do another question, which I wish everybody to participate. I have 2 designs over here. One is the protagonist, and the other one is the villain. So, which one is the protagonist and villain? I want to ask you guys, who do you think is the villain? Number 1 or 2? Raise your hand if you say it's number 1. Okay, 1 person say yes. Raise your hand if it's number 2. Okay, well, most of the people answered number 2. Can I get 1 person from the audience to explain why? No one?
Explain why we think that's the
Okay, well,
obviously it has a twisted design, it has a cage, handles with a little spiky.
yes, exactly.
The hair looks a little messy.
That's because the design itself conveys it. The silhouette explains it. This character, it looks scary. The design looks abstract. While the first one, it looks like the hero. It's like a person holding a sword ready to save the world.
The cape looks normal and the
Yep.
hair and the ponytail looks organized.
And I want to ask, anyone know who's this character? 2 of it? Who?
Terra and Kefka.
Peak Cinema. From what series may I know?
Final Fantasy 6.
Okay,
Great.
please do you want coffee or mint?
Coffee.
Okay.
Nice.
This is your gift because you are somehow able to guess it. You ready? Okay,
Like say, it is correct. It is Tara, Redford, and Kefka Palazzo. I don't know why somebody can guess this, guys. But most of your guess are correct, even though you guys don't know the series. I would say Final Fantasy VI is pretty old, but you immediately know that Kefka Palazzo's silhouette is the villain, and while Tara Redford is the protagonist. Why? It is conveyed in the silhouette itself. Therefore, I would immediately say, every time you want to create a character, think about the silhouette. Think about what you want to convey, the functionality, the design in mind. Like, the silhouette itself can already tell a lot about the character immediately. But, we're gonna move to another section, color hierarchy. After you're done designing your character, you already think about the shadow, the silhouette, and the functionality, and the message you want to convey about what is this character role and relation. You can think about color hierarchy. Color hierarchy can also conveys a lot about each character, like what is their story, what is their emotion, their expression. For example, SpongeBob. SpongeBob is dominated with yellow, and when you think about yellow, we immediately assume that character that's yellow is a character that's cheerful, happy, and it speaks a lot about SpongeBob immediately. We know that this is a piece of sponge that's annoying and happy. It explains it. But we also need to think that we cannot use all the characters yellow. We need some kind of hierarchy. So that's what I'll be explaining now. From SpongeBob itself, there's brown, there's white, there's red, there's blue in his eyes, and so on. Yeah, it's a bit darkish, greenish yellow. And this is basically the hierarchy that supports the main color. Because SpongeBob will be boring if it's just pure yellow. Somebody actually told me that if SpongeBob is pure yellow, it's just SpongeBob naked, which is so boring. But moving on, how do we actually decide how color hierarchy works? It's basically from this wheel over here. In the color wheel, you basically can use complementary colors to actually support each other. But there's multiple theories on this, which I don't want to go too deep because it's professional, but you can actually Google this by yourself. And here it is. Basically, there's square, this, but you need to think first about what main color you're going to use. For example, if you're going to use blue, you need to draw a square, and then this, and this could be your supporting colors to make your character design. And then, so on for the other theories. Basically, just draw the color wheel, choose your main color, and you will do fine in designing your character to pop up. But if you're asking me how to implement it, it basically goes like this. I'll say it's trial and error. Usually in AAA studio, or like in any indie studio, they will ask you to prepare multiple drafts with multiple colors after your design is okay. So this is how the implementation should be going. Like you see, the top changes color multiple times. There's yellow, there's red, there's white, there's light blue. And again, I would say, if all the colors, like for example, this character is just straight up black, it will be so boring. That's why always experiment with colors where you're thinking about making character concept. Yes?
Do you ever break the rules? Like, for designing certain characters, are there ever moments where you don't go by the rules that people usually go by?
Yes, there are certain times where you actually can break the rules, but I would say when you break the rules, you need to think about the character lore too. Like for example, I forgot which character, but I remember a character in Hoyo Verse, made by the Hoyo Verse Studio, where the character is mainly dominated by the color blue, but she has a tassel that's colored red. Why this happens? It's connected to the character lore because her friends are like colored red. So you need to think of that too when you're designing character, which move on to this. So this is usually things that artists will do. They will gather a reference and then draw the character with online the silhouette and then the color hierarchy. For example, you can see Sailor Moon in here. There's a bit of reference that set up the character itself. So when you think about Sailor Moon, she's a schoolgirl, but when you look at her carefully, wait, she doesn't look like a normal Japanese high school girl. Like, there's something wrong with her design. Because why? She has superpower. That's why this board reflects who she is. Moving on. This is Darth Vader. When you look at Darth Vader, this thing immediately connects to you because this explains the Darth Vader character itself. School, soldier, samurai. Darth Vader itself is a soldier too, technically. So yeah, all of this explains who Darth Vader really is. Okay, how does this application actually works in design in real life? For example, this is not my design by the way, but I'm gonna say I'm designing a lady in armor. I already designed her silhouette, her colors, and it's good so far. But how do I want to design her? Of course, we need to look back into the knight design from the past eras. As you can see from the helmet, from her shoulder, her armors, the types, there's also leather in there. We need to think about the functionality about what a knight will actually use in real life. So that inspired the design. But I'm going to clarify again. This design is made with aesthetic on mind. So that's why the conventional design is not existent in here because it's made to attract eyes. But again, so this is what I would say is important when you're making character design. First, shapes and silhouette. Second, color and color hierarchy on mind. And then third, functionality, like how your character is supposed to act, like the materials of the clothes and placement of weapons, etc. Like what do you want your character to be? What message you want to convey about this character? What is this character's job? What is this character's emotion? What is the lore? And well, if you do all of this, you can make a good character that is very distinct with each other. And then after we've done talking about the character, we need to talk about programming too, which is the back end to support the character design. Oh yeah. But anyways, we're gonna move on to Ryan with sound audio design. Yippee!
Hey guys, I'm Ryan. I'm the club's audio designer. I'm the one that will have an issue with you when you want to make sound. So let's get started actually. So why do we have audio in games? Someone tell me why right now. You see me here.
Otherwise, the game would be boring without an audio.
That's very broad.
You feel empty, like you're not hearing your footsteps, you're not hearing, chatter or anything like that.
Oh, that's correct. Well, why is it that you feel empty? Specifically, you're hearing me right now. That's a sense, a human sense, unless you're deaf, I'm sorry. But generally, you would be able to hear things and you expect that in games. Have you played any sports? You know how good it feels to hit something but bad. It's got sound, it's got a twang to it. You need that stuff. So let's just get started. There's some basics. So sound effects, I just mentioned sound effects. We obviously need sound effects. It's got feedback, it's got impact, it gives you gratification, that's a big word. And it can provide a lot of gamification, even to things that don't feel like they belong to games. So like, I have Persona right here, and obviously you might say, Persona, why are you talking about the soundtrack then? Now, that's way too boring, we all know about that. They have a lot of sound effects in Persona, which gamify half of the game. So, aside, who has played Persona? I'm sure some of you guys have. Alright, so we know half of the game is a social simulator. One of which you talk to characters, like a visual novel. I remember during the welcoming party, people were arguing that visual novels are not games, right? So, why is Persona still so loved in the mainstream? Why do I go online and people generally make content about the part of the game? They go outside and hang out with friends and they can hear the sound effects of like them hanging out. It's like, wow, I just doubled up. No, you did not. That is real life. But we still have these sounds that happen during the dialogue parts of the game. If we would actually start making the sounds. Thank you, YouTube. It's got a and you got a and that. Okay, that's it. Just realized the audio doesn't want to work. In my audio section? Are you for real?
I think I need to use it.
No, you're not muted. It is. How queer? How queer? You have a button?
Who's the speaker?
Alright, fine. Let's see again.
No, I mean this.
It's supposed to be connected to the speaker, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna play it. Wait, I haven't played it.
Just with the laptop speaker.
Is your last time it was broken? No, is your speaker actually okay? There we go. Speed it again. There we go.
Wait, I have another audio device.
Are you for real?
Yes.
In my audio section, I don't have audio. Oh my god. Alright, let me keep you guys company. Alright. Give me a game that sound effects have given you quite a. But it's what you call obscure, you know, it being a turn-based RPG. You bet the bigger number and you win. However, there's a parry system, and if it did not make any sound, why? As just I mentioned, right? In any sports, you want your thing to make sound. Like I know pickleball is like super annoying with everybody else, but when you're on the court, that sounds great. So while this is going on, you know what? I'm just gonna keep going on. Why does it not want to connect? I'm so sad. We spent so much time looking for these. I know I did not spend that much time in video.
Check, you want to review?
I mean, kind of funny. You know what? Let's just continue with the thing first. It's fine. I'll make the sound myself. I got a mouth. I'm a sound effect, you know. Yep. So just set up your laptop. Alright. I think you guys get the point of that. So soundtracks, obviously we all love soundtracks in games. Give me a game that's recently really popular because of the soundtrack. Recent. Don't give me some like insane ball knowledge. You won't be having a conversation because of that. Come on, somewhere in the crowd. You. Doom. Of course, everybody loves Doom because of the soundtrack. You know, B1 and 1 were the original game. What? Yeah, Gordon. So, why do we want the soundtrack? You could just put any music, right? That would be kind of lame. We need a narrative, an emotional setting. We need to set the tone. Music holds a deep connection to our memory. Actually, we forget when we have issues of memory. The last thing we tend to forget is music. So games leverage this back by producing and playing the appropriate soundtrack to sell the mood of the game. So you guys probably heard of Deltarune, Undertale. I'm sure you're in Gamedev, but you haven't heard of that. It'll be kind of crazy. But why is it so important in soundtracks? The music great, but people say that it sells the story. It's because they use a thing called motifs, repeated phrases, the same melody to bridge the same story, the same kind of story gaps. You know, there are certain bosses in Deltarune that share the same kind of melody because it's significant. So they use this to set the tone, make it emotional when it comes back in a later part. You know, Chekhov's gun. You have this technique where you show something off, you bring it back again in the end. It's cool. Oh no, they took away my slides. It's me.
You're sorry for technical difficulties also?
On my info done? Oh,
Hear things now.
that's incredible. At one point, I'll teach you guys how to write contracts. It'll be a great time. Honestly, you should maybe go to music club as well if you want to write more. But I'll be teaching on integration part. You know, I write music, but I don't really play on my instruments too. I'm not even kidding.
I can't reach music with enough instruments. I cannot do instruments.
Yeah, understandable.
I can do, I can read like, where's the range, you know? Basic stuff.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, oh my god.
I did it! Alright.
Yeah, right.
god. Alright, let's continue. Oh, FL Studio, I'll talk about that later. So, last component, you need to be immersive, you need like to make space, it needs to be more grounding, your game needs to be immersive. So we have environmental audio. And why environmental audio? I'm gonna shut up for a second. There's actually sound about. You got the air conditioning, you got the echoes of the room, and maybe a bit of clicking word of something like a projector in here. It's because silence isn't real in real life. And if it was, if you had silence in real life, you would lose your mind. That's an actual torture mechanic people use to get information out of you. So when you are playing a game, there's almost no point at which there should be no sound at all. So got a very obvious example here. Can someone play that for me? Click the button. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I love Monster Hunter, that's why I have this up here. So I would play this game forever. Now this sounds like a forest. At any point of the game in Monster Hunter, you will hear background noise because it's a game where you explore the outer world and hunt monsters. And as a hunter, you're outside. And outside has sounds generally. I know we're in Gamedev, maybe we don't go outside that much. But it's pretty real. It sounds really great. I have spent like maybe a good 10, 20 minutes every time I see a cave, just to look around. My friend loves to walk around a Monster Hunter, and I only realized how much they change the environmental audio based on where you are. And that really sold the fact that this is a real breathing world. So it keeps the experience plausible basically. So let's go on to more game dev stuff-ish. Why won't it change now? Yeah. Who knows about adaptive or dynamic audio? Soundtracks, basically. Raise your hands if you know what the adaptive audio is. Awesome. So, it's obvious, we're talking about game dev. We're making games, so we're not making films. In a film, you obviously have, a score. It's really scored for the film. It lines up with the story beats, and it plays the same way every single time because it's film. We are playing a game. Timings are going to be different every time. Like we go about controlling the character. So how do I control the music so it fits what you're doing at the moment? Well, obviously we adapt. We make the music dynamic. And so we'll talk about what engines are used to do this later. But let's just listen to a very old version of Ultra Kill. This is so dated. So I want to pay attention. This is all the guitar in the background, very aggressive, very scary voice, just put the shoe each other there. And once it clears out, the car goes away, and it comes right back in as I can see. Right here. So what can you tell from this? First of all, it's cool. I love it. This is the first level of the game and really sells like the mood of the game. And second of all, it's actually informative when there is less aggressive music, there are no people to shoot. And apparently it's told many people, especially like speedrunners, that oh, the music's chill now, I've killed everything in this room, I can move on. So that's the most simple way that Ultra Kill uses dynamic audio. Some games just forget this altogether because they don't need to. Risk of Rain has a great soundtrack. Risk of Rain has an incredible soundtrack. We have memes about it. But it doesn't really have dynamic audio because instead it just has a long, winded, slow build-up that just simply fits the mood of the game. So I think dynamic audio is cool, but you don't have to fret too much about it if it doesn't make sense. So we can move on right now to the next slide. Into how do I write soundtracks? Like, and how do I make the beeps and boops you hear in game? You need a DAW. You need a digital audio workstation. That's right, you need to learn something new. Our friend here mentioned FL Studio. I used to use FL Studio, but I'm going to talk about some more freer options where I do not advise you to do crimes and pirate, even though I think I'd rather you guys pirate. But Reaper is technically free. Have you guys used WinRAR, Vincent? They ask you to pay, even though you don't really have to. It's the same thing here. It's really customizable. Like, I love how customizable it is. So it's good for game dev purposes since you can customize it to work in game dev scenarios. It's quite steep in the learning curve, however, but I would recommend if you wanted to go into the field of writing music for games to pick up Reaper. If not, LLMS is completely open source and free. Is it great? I started making music on LLMS. I've stopped using LLMS. I think that answers your question. But it taught me how to use a DAW. You can learn how to make music on it. And, well, some people continue to make music on it. It's fine. You know, it works. If you have an iOS, if you have a MacBook, GarageBand is a thing. Now, that sounds like a joke to some people, but I have a friend. She's been making music for as long as I have, maybe 5 or 6 years, and she still uses GarageBand. So, I think she sounds better than me, I'm not gonna lie. So, it comes with Apple products, it just works. You can upgrade to the Logic Pro after that, because it's around the same thing. But I won't be mentioning those because that's a whole book. People argue all the time about those. So finally, I mentioned about how dynamic audio is in the game. So how do we do that? So pretty sure we are kind of partial to Godot in here, are we? we're kind of partial to Godot. They already have an inbuilt option to kind of handle some of the game the sound engine options. But I'll be talking about the third-party ones here because if you're using anything else, these kind of make sense too. So Fmod, Vice, these are like third-party software used to drive your audio experiences in games. The other day I was modifying Ready or Not. And I looked at the browser and Fmod was right there, which explains why how their sound direction is incredible. I can hear things vividly through the stereo audio. I can tell what's going on. It's just great. So these third-party softwares allow you to have interactive audio, spatial audio, way too important. You know, which of you freaks play the audio in here? your footsteps and the sounds, where they come from, it's driven by one of these, or some other program, but these are kind of most popular. Resource optimization, this is very important. A lot of your games, they are huge in file size, not because their map size are huge, it's because they just did not optimize their audio. These audio files can get huge, like massive per track. If you have like 200 OSTs in your game, and like each of them took up around like 100 megabytes already, that's a huge amount you already have to spend for audio. And that's not including your audio effects. So just putting in straight in Devlog wise, they automatically help you optimize the audio by just compressing it in some way. And finally, real-time mixing. What is mixing anyways? Mixing is when you get the audio and you kind of mix it together, you know, volume levels and everything. Why is that important? Because it wouldn't make sense if a person next to you makes the same footsteps down as someone far away from you. Real-time mixing helps you, change the volume as expected. You guys played Peak, hopefully, or heard of Peak. Very well known for its very funny effects of like friends screaming and flying away. Yeah. It's being run by melodies as well. You need real-time mixing to get a funny effect. So I think that's about it, right? Wonderful. We can move on to Drew.
Alright guys, we're finally moving on to programming. Now, we've been telling you guys about all the cool stuff, the beautiful art, the visuals, the game design, the mechanics of your game, and of course, what Ryan just talked about, the audio that makes the game feel real. But how do we put everything into a game? Because art on its own isn't a game. Audio on its own, that's just audio. You need something, an architecture, to put it all together. That's programming. Now, I know out of all that we've discussed, programming is probably one of the more scary topics. So, has anyone here ever felt like nervous about learning programming? Why do you feel nervous about programming?
A lot of things you gotta model in your head sometimes, even with the material available. Sometimes what they provide you online is something different than what you want entirely.
Yeah, that's one of the traps that come with programming. Because programming, at the end of it.
Yeah, like say you want to have a character to jump scare you, but when you try to look for it, you only just come up with like how the character moves and whatever. Sometimes.
Yeah, as I was saying, that's one of the traps that comes with programming. Because at the end of the day, programming is simply an abstraction. Your computer understands a certain language, and the programming that you code, you type, that's transcribed into what your computer understands. So of course, with such complexity, you won't always get what you want so easily online. Programming is just one of those things that take a lot of logic. However, today I'm here to make that a little bit easier for you. Is everyone here experienced with code, or do we have any experienced coders here? So one experienced, two experienced coders. Anyone else? You. All right. So I assume everyone else here is kind of new to coding and just wants to get into Gamedev, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Good to know. That makes this kind of a little bit more suited towards the inexperienced people we have here. So let me get started. Starting with programming, you've got to understand, as I said, it's just an abstraction. It's logic, it's understanding that you just need to build up yourself to create what you want. However, we can make that a little bit easier here, because we just got to understand what programming actually is. Programming reacts to what the player does. It's a set of variables, events, and functions that change how the game works in your eyes and how your actions actually change what happens on your screen. So let me start out with explaining these three things. Now, before I get started, I want to just explain that these three things, they're good components to know. They're basic and they're, I would say, core components that everyone that codes needs to know before they start going into advanced components. Because when you actually do want to create your games, it's not just going to be so simple as these three things. You're going to need no worries. You're just going to need to be able to combine these three components into creating more advanced functionalities to actually model what your ideas for your game are. Now let me get started. Variables are essentially where you store your game data, like point amount, player point amount, health. Those are your variables. Very simple, right? Events are the changes that actually happen on your screen. So events are when you trigger them. When you trigger an event, that leads to a function call. When a function is called, that is what happens in the backend. Functions are the reusable blocks of code that are used over and over on the backend. So for example, an event would be completing a mission. And completing that mission will call a function such as mission complete, which then rewards you by editing your variables, your point amount, your level, and your experience. Based off that, it determines your player state and whatever you see on your screen. These are the simple building blocks that go into programming. And there is something more that I want to talk about. Although it's not directly a core component, it is one of the most basic parts of code, and that are if statements and case blocks, which I have an example of on the next slide. So over here, I have an example of an if statement, all right? An if statement is one of the very basic pieces of code that you will be using when you are programming. And although it's not the most optimized, it is good understanding for you guys to have as beginners. So for over here, you can see that it's just a very basic if statement. If you have enough points, in this case 100, you can unlock the upgrade. If not, you see something else. That's quite literally the basis of programming. So I know at the very far end, programming gets very complex, but if you guys do want to get into programming, I don't want you guys to be afraid of anything, because at the end of the day, programming starts easy, just like everything else that you learn. Moving on, I want to talk about game engines. Because yes, programming is its own thing, because game dev programming, specifically for game development, it's not the same as regular programming. Because, for example, in regular programming, you just pick a language, you pick where you want to work, and then you get with it. But when it comes to game development, you don't just pick a language. You have to pick an engine, and your engine that you pick actually determines what language you have to use to create your game. So what is a game engine actually? Like Ryan was talking about earlier, an audio engine, game engines are quite similar to that. But they capture a little bit more than just the audio. So generally, like Ryan was talking about, audio engines are sometimes packaged or come with the game engine. But game engines are, as I said, more than that. They're essentially just the entire pre-built architecture that you need to put your game within. It comes with the core systems, the rendering, the physics, and the input, the collision detection even. All the basics and the very advanced backend that you don't want to make over and over again. Because when you want to create your game, you don't want to have to create everything from scratch. You want a package that you can use as a toolbox to build what you want to create. This can come with a lot of things. For example, with visuals, you have your toolbox. You can think of it even as just Lego blocks. Segments and understandings that you can call and use to put your code within to get your output. Here I'm going to give you some examples of what engines there actually exist. I'm going to start with Godot because Godot is what we'll be primarily using to teach you guys within the Devlog series. The reason is simply because Godot is, I would say, the best beginner.
Python like for one.
Yes, exactly, that's one of my points here as well. One of the reasons that I want to teach you guys Godot is because it's very simple and it's similar to Python, like my friend over here said. And Python is one of the easiest languages that you start with. Additionally, because we want you guys to end with a game of your own, Godot is one of the powerful languages for this because it's, engines for this.
C# and C++,
Yes.
which are exclusive mostly to Unity.
Yeah, I'll be touching on that here as well. Another reason is because Godot is free, open source, and has no royalties at all. So if you guys do want to turn your small ideas here into actual games, you can do that with the Godot engine that we'll be teaching you here today. Additionally, another few reasons that I do want to teach you guys Godot is because I understand you guys are university students. Not all of you guys will have powerful rigs or computers that you'll be able to run Unreal Engine on. So Godot runs on basically anything. You can run on cheap hardware, mid-range hardware, and definitely high-end hardware. So it's simple to work with and work on. But let's not get too deep on the technicalities of Godot, because I just wanted to get you guys familiar with it. It's the simple 2D or 3D, depending on what you want to do, language and engine that can do just about anything. It won't be the most complex, it won't be the most advanced, but it will do the job, especially for beginner developers or even just indie game developers. There's many games that are Godot. Moving on, let's talk about a little bit of what I call the mid-range of game engines. It's Unity. Unity is one of those languages that can do just about everything, but to a higher level than Godot. It's slightly more difficult than Godot, I would say, because it uses C# rather than a single language like Godot's language. And it is similar to, I would say, the industry standard, though not the bleeding edge industry standard. Because Unity is one of those languages that reach somewhere to AAA, but not quite. I would say it's more close to AA or usually single A level of creation. But what makes Unity such a powerful language that has been used in many, many places, like you see in about 30% of all mobile games, is because of its ecosystem. It is so documented and it has so many resources that you can pull from, so much tutorials that even though its difficulty is slightly.
Of course, it's royalty.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because as he said, it has so many resources, there is a little bit of royalty when you want to publish games on the file. Yeah, the licensing and everything comes with that. Which is why we're not using it to teach you guys here. Though I will say, if you guys do want to move on from Godot, Unity is one of those steps that you should take, because it has transferable skills that lead to just about any enterprise developing agency, or simply just that concepts and understandings that you'll find useful throughout your career. Now, I'm talking about Unreal next. This is the bleeding edge. There's no other word to describe this other than simply bleeding edge. I assume almost all of you here are familiar with Unreal Engine. A lot of AAA games use this.
Familiar, but we don't. Because we don't create it yet.
Yes, of course. You guys won't be creating with Unreal Engine for quite a while. It is computing the mountain, yeah. Just about every AAA game that doesn't use their own proprietary engine uses Unreal Engine simply because of its capability. It's complex, it's unstable, but it's so beautiful and it's so powerful. It has capabilities with just about anything. You can integrate machine learning, you can integrate ray tracing, you can integrate just about whatever rendering that you can think of and whatever functionality that you can think of. However, with that level of power, as I said, comes a great deal of complexity. It's one of those languages that take time to learn. It's one of those languages that are just so difficult. Though there is a little bit of caveat to what I say when I say it's very hard. Unreal Engine doesn't actually have a blueprinting method. However, it's not quite as informational to learn as simply starting from the basics like Godot, which is why we choose to use Godot instead. Unreal Engine's blueprinting system, it has value and you can create decent games with it, but it won't teach you the same core concepts and understandings that are as easy to learn with Godot or even Unity. No, we're not using Unity.
That you can use blueprints to begin, but you don't necessarily need to end it right there.
Yes.
You still use C++ at the end of the day.
Yes, that is how it works with Unreal Engine. So blueprinting, it's kind of like syntaxless coding, but it doesn't allow you to use 100% of the engine. If you do want to get the most customizability and power from the engine, you have to go into raw scripting with C++. Okay. Alright, moving on, I'm going to touch a little bit on the topic of GameMaker. GameMaker, I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's simply one of those really basic languages. If you guys are really not into coding, you guys really don't understand anything, you guys can start with GameMaker. It's purely locked in 2D, and I would say it's kind of just to get the very basic understanding. You won't spend more than a month on GameMaker. Even if you're one of those people that really hate coding, GameMaker is still going to be extremely easy. I would say it's just a step above scratch, and you could use it as a bridge from no programming at all to get into Godot. Though Godot is easy enough that I recommend people start with it in general. Alright. Moving on, I'm going to be passing it to Doshan. We've talked about just about every segment so far, from programming to world building to art, and even the game design that goes into creating games. But how do you get everything to work together well? You have your code, you have your art, so you have to have an ending, and that's going to be polishing.
Okay, so first of all, what is polishing? What is polishing? So polishing is when you already have made something and you make it better, and generally something that you do to improve the quality of the game, of the things that you already have done. You don't really make a new thing. And why you should polish is because a lot of the time it's a very good way to make your game seem higher quality than it actually already is, and it can make your core mechanics even better. And when to polish. So generally, you want to polish your game when you're 80% done, because that means you most likely already have a playable game and you have something that you can actually, you're not polishing too early basically. But for your main mechanics, it's okay to polish while you're developing them or after you develop them, instead of waiting for 80% mark, because you want to make sure that those are really good and really up to standards and they are going to be what makes your game what it is. And you're never really going to have a perfect game when you're polishing. You're never going to get to a point where you say it's 100% good, it's 100% done. You're always going to have something that you think can be improved. So it's important to make sure that you have some measurement to say that you should stop polishing at some point. A lot of the time, it would say you give a certain specific time limit, let's say 2-3 months. Or if you want to use a different method, you can also say for this particular feature, how much will the player actually benefit from it? And from there, you can kind of, in your head, think about whether it's actually worth doing this or not, rather than endlessly polishing. And then what to polish? So, it depends on your game. It very much depends on what your game is and what you're doing. But some general guidelines is that whenever the player does something, you want there to be a reaction. So, it can either be some particles or like from the earlier section, it's very good to have some audio, even if it's small, or an animation. Having an animation is always very good, no matter what the feature is, even in like a menu. If you go to your game, right, and you look at the main menu, it's a very good example of polishing, because if it moves, if it makes a noise, all that, it's very good. It's basically how they polish the game. And it's a very easy way to see without actually having to go too deep within the game. And then when you are transitioning between areas in your game, if you need to have a loading screen, it's best to give them some sort of like dynamic animation that shows them how it's loading the progress bar, rather than just having some static thing where you don't really know what's going on. And then B, even if you don't need to load for a long time, it's good to just have some sort of transitioning effect or animation to indicate that, oh, you're going somewhere, something important is happening. And the next thing is, something that even large games sometimes miss, is to make sure that the player has everything that they need to know within the game, and they can actually see all the different controls properly, they know what the buttons do, and they can configure certain things like audio as they want. Because even here, I remember I played Sekiro, and I couldn't adjust the in-game audio, and I couldn't adjust some of the buttons. I had to just work with what was there. That's very abrasive, and that's something that gamers will notice. And so it's a relatively small amount of effort compared to the return and the user experience you get out of it. And you don't always have to make it into a menu or like the settings tab. Having in-game tutorials and having in-game things they can read to understand the mechanics, or teaching them the mechanics while playing the game, and like, your hunger bar, you don't need to explain how it works, they will experience it. All of these things should be inside the game, it should be easy to understand within the game itself. If they have to go outside the game to wikis, it's going to be very annoying, and that will potentially make you lose players in the long run. And then one other thing, and it's a subsection of polishing, is optimization. And this is more on the coding section. So it's something that you'll have to deal with eventually, most likely, but not immediately. So why is it important to optimize? Games have a lot of assets, and some games have a lot of what's it called? A very large map. And in these cases, you're going to cause a lot of performance requirements for the user. They might have to need a lot of RAM, a lot of CPU power in the case of something like Minecraft. So to optimize the game is to allow more people to be able to play your game, people with this hardware. A very large number of people have below what hardware is considered to be the standard for the particular, for our time period. For 2026, I think it's about 50%. Is below what it should be in terms of where we are in terms of pricing and all that. So this will definitely allow a lot more people to be able to play your game if you do it right and you don't spend too much time on it like another polishing. So when I already addressed this. So these are certain examples of when to worry about polishing. So if you're running a very large map on your game, and kind of more RPGs, it's definitely going to be a major concern. Even the best computers are not able to run the game. You don't optimize it to some extent. Games with a lot of assets, like a lot of FPS games like Valorant or most recently Devlog, you are probably going to need to optimize the game because there's so many assets and like effects and all this is flying around the screen. If you don't polish it, the average computer is not going to be able to handle all of what's going on there. And games with very deep mechanics, like let's say the Latro, where you've got a lot of algorithmic things going on in the back, you do need to optimize that because otherwise you're going to get some like really long and slow algorithms. It's not really going to work. And that is much more of a technical thing than some of the other things here that's a bit more obvious because you're getting into algorithms and how long it takes to actually run it. If you're familiar with big O notation, that's a factor of it. And so some of the possible solutions to some of these optimization problems is the following. So if you've got a big map, you can just render what's directly in front of the player rather than rendering the entire map. Or if you need to simulate things around the player, you can just simulate within a certain range. So a very obvious example of this is Minecraft, where you can actually configure how many chunks are visually rendered and how many chunks are being simulated around the player. And like I said before, if you've got a lot of assets, you can, instead of deleting them and making them come back and all, creating them, sorry, you can just move them from place to place. So when it's happening on the screen, you move it to where it's happening, in the X and Y position. And when it's done, you move it outside of the map, outside of where the player can see it, and you don't need to spend resources creating and destroying them every single time. And it really helps a lot with that particular use case. And then this is much more on the programming side, so it's more of a local mention for now, but it is something that you should know. Like don't load the entire game into memory. A lot of games, even small ones, are more than 10 gigabytes. If you try to load 10 gigabytes of memory into someone's laptop, the laptop is either going to be slow or it's going to crash, unless they have 32 GB, which the average person is like 8 to 16. And some notable examples of games which have failed to properly optimize is Tabs. This is a game I play a lot, it's a very popular game as well. If they don't update the game anymore because after their last update, the game would crash 90% of the time, and then anytime it did start, it would take 4 hours to open the main menu. So you really do need to make sure that like when you update over time, especially your live service game, you optimize and your code is readable, you can got good comments, you know what parts of your code are interacting with other parts so that you don't get some strange dependencies that you don't really understand later on. And yeah, that's the end of our information section on the workshop. Do you guys have any questions on the polishing and what's it called again? Optimization, polishing optimization section? No? Okay, then this is our feedback form. Tell us more about the event. And thank you for coming.
Alright guys, we love your feedback and just FYI, we understand that this workshop was quite long as compared to something that was more interactive, but this is actually meant to be our introductory workshop. So for coming workshops, level 1, level 2, it's going to be more on interactivity. So level 1 and on. Devlog 1 and onwards is going to be you guys doing work, and we're going to be showing you guys examples. So moving on, we're going to make sure to have the workshops more interactive and have more resources for you guys to play around with. Yeah.
Oh yeah, also you guys can please stick around for a photo we're revealing now.
For your artwork. You have a lot of chemical. It's like a direct fact. This one you can profess part of it. You look it. It's been.